Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome. My name is Mark Drax. I am back for another conversation from the couch. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Jessica Lamar and Marcus Earle. A very warm welcome to you both.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be with you.
Guys, it's great to have you. I know, Marcus, you're in Vail. I'm very jealous of your background. And I know that, Jessica, you're in Seattle, which is where, of course, you are going to be speaking at our conference in less than 2 months now, which is very exciting. So thank you both so much. I've got a few short questions to ask you to give anyone that's interested a little bit of a sort of a preview of what you're going to be talking about in Seattle. So the title of your conversation, of your presentation, is The Impact of Disenfranchised Grief on the Treatment of Sex Addiction. So whoever would like to go first, who would like to tell us all about the title and the depth of your presentation?
I can start. I feel like Marcus was going to hand it my way anyways.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jessica.
So the depth of our conversation and our topic is around disenfranchised grief, which is essentially grief and loss that isn't socially supported by society or our support system, or sometimes even by ourselves. And then what we're going to do is link that with sex addiction, which is also sometimes not socially supported by our support system, society, or sometimes even ourselves. And so what we're going to do is bring that together and talk about how to grieve that and how to grieve sexual addiction in a way that's meaningful and healing and powerful for not only self, but those around us.
Can I ask, Marcus, go for it.
I'd add one more thing, is I think partners also deal with this. In that, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable socially to grieve when you have a husband or a wife who's a sex addict. But go ahead, Mark, what were you going to ask?
Well, no, I was going to say the word disenfranchised, the two words, disenfranchised grief. When I saw the title of your presentation, I was thrilled to get this opportunity. Could you just maybe explain that for the lay person? Because I've never even heard the term.
Mm-hmm. In short, disenfranchised grief really is when our grief is truly not supported or acknowledged by society as a whole. For instance, this can be centered around the type of loss, the relationship, and addiction, where people might come in and say, oh, it's not big of a deal. It's, be happy that it's over, which I think what Marcus was referring to as partners. I think this comes up a lot with partners where maybe if a wife or husband decides to end the relationship with the addict, people in their support system might say, good for you, great, when really that partner is really grieving. And then on the other end, if they choose to stay in the relationship or the marriage, there still is that grief attached to grieving the marriage that they thought they had, right? Or the partner that they thought they were with, but they don't feel safe or that they have the space to do so because there's shame attached to the grief within staying in that relationship.
That is hugely helpful. Marcus, do you want to say anything else?
Jessica brought this concept to me a number of years ago, and it's been immensely helpful since, because it was not something I was paying attention to, like how we frame this. Is there a way to language around this? So I'm finding it really helpful with clients, and just even for myself personally.
I think another, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I think another way to look at disenfranchised grief is when we feel that our right to grieve is taken away. When people around us, and I think a lot of times with us ourselves, to say, I don't have the right to grieve that, right? It wasn't that big of a deal, or the relationship wasn't that important, or he does suffer from a sex addiction, or with the addict, I don't have a right to grieve my addiction because I caused harm to myself and others. So I just need to shift my behaviors or move on. When in reality, I think grief and addiction recovery is really important.
I'm thrilled you're addressing this topic. I don't know whether you know, Jessica, but I know you do, Marcus. I treat men who have been struggling with trauma and abuse, and some of my clients have sex addiction, some don't. But I specifically I try and help men put their life back together from a coaching role. And I have heard horror stories in since 2013, I've been doing this. I've heard some horror stories of partners, most often wives, of sex addicts, being told by some therapists or psychiatrists or even doctors, words along the lines of, why don't you just go home and open your legs and everything will be better? And I mean, the horror stories that come out, and now, of course, thanks to people like Barbara Steffens, we understand that partners suffer PTSD let alone grief. So I'm thrilled to hear you talking about this. How specifically could you say this, and a better understanding of this topic is going to be is helpful towards sexual health?
Yeah, for me, I think that we, as a culture, as a society, do not embrace grief in a way that would be helpful. And so in our inability or difficulty, in the uncomfortableness of facing our grief and embracing our grief, I think we create a shutdown internally. And so when we shut down internally, it's hard to go forward. And so in our ignoring or not paying attention or walking through the grief that we all face in all different facets, and this is such an overt one, that it's impossible to pursue something healthy when you're bogged down in something that is powerful inside of you, that needs to come out, needs expression, needs support. How can you move forward in connection if you're bogged down and tied up internally?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with so much of what Marcus is saying is that, the more that we can, I think, embrace our grief, give our grief a voice, that can give us, I think, the freedom to then shift our relationship with our sexuality, and shift it into a much more healthy type of sexuality, and feel that somebody has the power and the safety to work through their sexuality in a healthy way. But I do think that one has to start with grieving their messaging around their sexuality and themselves and their addiction before somebody can then shift into this other part safely.
Grieving has been a huge part of my own recovery. I am a sex addict in recovery, and I tried to bury any possible opportunity to grieve with more sex for years, for decades, and lost in my own pain, failing to grieve what was done to me as a child, let alone what I then went on to do to others. So it's only, I'm 54, and it's only in the last 4 years of my life that I believe I finally got myself, with a lot of very good help, to a place where, having grieved my past, forgiven myself what I then came to do because of my distant past, I can find a decent, intimate relationship with myself, first and foremost, and now with other people. So it's very, very special to hear you talking about this critical subject. Tell me, what from specifically from your presentation, what would you like people that come to your presentation to take away?
So many things. No.
Yeah, go for it. Go. Jessica, you start.
I think first and foremost, it's going to be around validating the grief process. And really, I think not even for clients and looking at it from that perspective as clinicians, but also for self. I think it's really helpful for us as clinicians to honor our own grief process and to acknowledge that first and foremost, and to really understand and look at ways in which we disenfranchise ourselves, and then look at possible ways in which we can do that to some of the people in which we treat without even realizing it. I do think a lot of disenfranchised grief is sometimes not fully in our awareness. And so I hope to increase that awareness for people.
I hope for people to take away an experience. We're not just going to be sharing information and distributing, facts, that kind of thing. I'm at a point in my life where if I can't experience the talk, then I'm a little less interested in it. And so that's our hope. And certainly the way we're designing this is involvement, with those that come. So if you're looking for something, you want to sit back and just have good information given to you, it's probably not going to be the talk to come to. But if you want to come and get involved and probably experience some growth yourself, then I think it'd be a great experience. And if we fall short of that, then we'll be grieving.
We'll grieve.
Hey, Mr. Earle. Jessica, I don't sadly know much about you. Marcus, of course, we've known each other for a few years, and I know that you at PCS, your whole modus operandi is about experiencing things. And Jessica, I've no doubt that yours is too, or I doubt you'd be on the same page as Marcus. I think you must have something in common to have gotten together to do this. So thank you for that. tell people that might be watching this anything you'd like to share more about yourselves, where they can find you, what are you participating in any other talks, conferences, webinars which you think might be interesting to our viewers?
You can go first, Marcus.
I think, I'm looking forward to this because this will be my first in-person conference, for over a year. So that's going to be nice to reconnect in person with people beyond, the practice and people at work and friends locally. So that's going to be a nice piece that I hope everybody's excited about is this potential getting back together. And I know there's still things to be apprehensive about. And yet I think we know kind of how to handle this at this point. At least I hope we do. The other thing for me, Mark, I was thinking about, you said earlier about how you've learned so much in the past 4 years about grief. And, for me, it's looking at my early recovery in sex addiction, then getting lost in work and trying to, balance family, which I failed at. And now realizing there's even more grief at this point in time, that this is an ongoing process that all of us are involved in, over the course of our lives. And I think becoming more clear about grief for myself has been immensely helpful. It's given me a different way to talk about and share what's going on inside, rather than, my tendency is to always be moving forward. And I might do some work about trauma and looking at the pain around that, but I haven't been good about looking at loss, all along. And in that loss, there's so much for me to learn, because it helps me to pay attention to impact of what's not happened or what has happened. And then certainly, not wanting to repeat, things, and wish I didn't repeat some things, but that creates more grief and we just keep going. And so as it becomes a part of lifestyle, then I think there's a comfort that develops. Fear decreases, can be more confident internally, rather than it just being something I wear externally. So
there's a lovely expression which I talked about at a presentation I gave a year or two ago, which says that we repeat what we don't repair.
Yeah,
which I love.
That's good.
You're talking very much to that.
A couple of things that were coming to mind as Marcus was sharing was just how much grief isn't, openly talked about, and there's just so much discomfort with that. And I think grief, sexuality, we can throw money in there. I think these are big topics that are really, really important for everybody to talk about and share their experience and to be able to talk about them together. I'm really, really excited for that. I, of course, have so much more to learn about my own grief process. And so to be able to even share that with other people in this type of platform is something I'm looking forward to as well. And like you were saying earlier, Mark, disenfranchised grief is not popular enough. And so to continue to have the conversation around the term and to help people acknowledge that everybody has the right to their own grief process, to acknowledge their own losses. I just think is a further opportunity for everybody to come together, especially in a time like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and of course, thanks to the last 18 months, many of us have a lot, even more to grieve about. Mm-hmm. And whether we have or have not lost a loved one or someone we know, just the separation, the anxiety caused by being boxed up in our houses, unable to meet and talk. I attended my first ever music festival with a bunch of crazy friends, sort of smaller version of the famous Glastonbury's 2 weekends ago. It was only about 10,000 people, which compared to Glastonbury at 150,000 is small. But even to be amongst 10,000 people, it was so palpable, the joy to reconnect. And to see people just embracing and sitting shoulder to shoulder, listening to music, listening to poetry, it was a fabulous festival. So I totally get what you're saying. Guys, it's an immensely, immensely important topic, and especially in the realms of sex addiction, which, as you said at the beginning, is still not talked about enough. It is still shamed so much. If you go to a drinks party and someone offers you a drink and you say, I'm on the wagon, you get a pat on the back. But if you go to a drinks party and someone says, let's go to a strip bar, and you go, oh no, I'm a sex addict. At best, they're going to think you're weird. And at worst, they're going to think you're a predator. You know, neither of which is necessarily true. Right. So I'm thrilled to hear you talking about this, especially as a sex addict in recovery myself. Guys, any closing comments before we see you live, amazing, in Seattle?
Not for me. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Really appreciate it.
Well, guys, look, a huge thank you. Because of the fact that I'm speaking to you from England, and at the moment I am still not actually allowed into your country, I have to sadly sit here and say, despite doing all the interviews, I may not even get to Seattle. I may not be still, and the way things are going with this Delta variant, there's a growing possibility I won't even be allowed to come to the conference. So guttingly, you may be there without me, but thank you for all you're doing for yourselves, for our community, and thank you for coming to our conference. And I hope to see you in 2 months in Seattle.
I hope so. You're the only person I get to hug or I look up to. So,
and if you don't get to come, I hope you grieve it.
Thank you. Oh, look, bless you. Good. A lovely closing comment. Listen, both, thank you so much. I hope to see you there. For now, God bless and keep safe.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.